My name is Annette Hoffmann. I'm the XP Vice President and I'm a professor of sports science or sports studies at the Ludwigsburg University of Education. And it's great to see so many of you here. I read a lot of familiar names. June 23 is the official Olympic Day. It's a few days back. This day reminds of the founding of the IOC in 1894, and in many countries there are special celebrations or events on this day. In Germany, we have a huge event for children, for schools in Cologne at the German Sports Museum for about 500 or 600 participants, and Olympic and Paralympic athletes join this, and they mingle with the students and they talk about their Olympic experiences and challenges. A few universities, at least here in Germany, they took up the tradition of the Olympic Day and they organize Olympic study days. These are usually days or panels or whatever, where issues concerning the Olympic Games or Olympism are critically reflected upon. And this is what we are doing here today. I'm organized this Olympic Study Day for my university, the Ludwigsburg University of Education, together with XP. XP has a serial, it's a so-called Global Teaching Excellent serial. These are online sessions on special topics, and this is now our 8th session. Today's topic is balancing gold and green, sustainability challenges of the Olympic Games. This panel will feature international scholars and experts, and they will discuss the complex environmental issues of the Olympic movement and above, not just Olympism. Let me quote the IOC on their homepage. Here you can read, "Driven by our vision to build a better world through sport, we believe it is our responsibility to contribute to global sustainability efforts in line with Olympic Agenda 2020 +5. Our aim is to minimize our footprint and maximize our positive influence across social, environmental, and economic spheres." And this is what we will look today at, and mostly from an ecological perspective. As mentioned, we have 3 scholars here who deal with this in their research. Each of them will have a 8 to 10-minute presentation, and afterwards we will start a general discussion where you all are invited to either ask in person, just lift your hand, and then our assistant Barbara, she will show your face and you can talk here, or you just put your question in the chat. You can already start during the presentations to put questions in the chat. I will introduce each of the presenters just before they will talk, and I will start with my dear friend and a very good colleague, Pierre Olaf Schut. He teaches in France at the Gustave Eiffel University in Paris, and presently he has the last days as ISPES president, which is the International Society for the History of Sport and Physical Education. He deals with a lot of different research areas. Among them are outdoor activism and tourism, sport facilities and town planning, Olympic history. And he's an international scholar that you see at many conferences abroad and who publishes in sport history and sport sociology journals. And many of his publications are related to Olympism. And during the Paris Olympic Games, he was involved in a big project on sustainability, which has been published to some of the results, and he's still continuing on with some project. One is on carbon footprint of international kayaking competitions during the Olympics and on swimmability in the River Seine. So Pierre Olaf, you will be the first and you may start.
Thank you, Annette, for your kind introduction. I will share my screen. Yeah, I think it works now. Okay. So it's quite difficult to speak about environmental issues of the Paris Olympic Games um, in only 8 or 10 minutes. So I will try to give you an overview. And as Annette said, I'm involved in different research projects. So during the time of the question and answers, I can maybe give you more specific insight on the topic on which I'm working on. So just quickly, I think it's important to think about the challenge for Paris 2024, because the organizing committee has to deal with all the standards to make an event more sustainable, and standards both from the French side, so about the sport policy, about the sustainability policy of the country, but also about the sports organization, the IOC agenda, and also all the international um, agreement between the different countries about the effort to reduce the carbon footprint and to enhance the ecological aspect. So it was quite challenging for them, and try to give them all the highest standards to be met during the organization of the games. So in this more political context, there is one part of the question, but it's also important to think about how we manage this all this question of sustainability, of environmental issues, and the carbon footprint, and it's usually a kind of trajectory that we had by the different event. And of course, we're dealing about the Olympics, so each edition of the Olympics, which is only every 4 years, make the trajectory who increase or decrease or accelerate the process to, for example, decrease the carbon footprint. Not sure if you can really see it in full screen size, but I think
Yeah,
so.
it was. I don't know if you can put it in presentation mode. Would be great.
It is, but I think it's only on my screen. I don't know why it's not on yours, but I will
Yes,
try
no, it's we
just to
we can
not.
read it if it's we can
Yeah,
read it if it's not possible. It looks good. Thank you.
sorry.
Yeah, no,
Um,
it looks good. Thank you.
okay. So this is the context for Paris 2024, and that's why they make specific efforts about the environmental issues. And I want also to be quite critical, because I will also use some quotation from the report about sustainability that they have published. They published just a couple of months after the games. So of course, in this report, they can show how they do a lot of efforts and good and some positive things. But I want also I also want to be quite critical, because we are academics and we need to pay attention about the details and the different aspect of this of these things. So my question that I want to answer quite behind this report and some numbers is about the contribution of sport organization, and especially in this case the Olympic Committee, because the progress about environmental issues, the effort to decrease environmental footprint, are not only the fact of sports organization. And I'm also involved in a work group with the sport ministry about the effort for the sports organization to decrease the carbon footprint. And because transportation is the most important part of the carbon footprint of sporting activities, if we just rely on the effort of the car industry, we just have nothing to do in sports organization, and we will decrease our carbon footprint due to the effort and the development of electric vehicle and so on. So it's important also to not to just rely on other sectors and aspect of the economy, but also to just understand what are the real efforts done by sports organization and how sports organization can also increase or accelerate the effort to have more sustainable event or just activities in general. So in this case, of course, you will see that in some aspects there is some effort which depends more about the other sectors like building works or transport, but we also have some aspects linked to the sports organization and the effort of sport organization to decrease carbon footprint or to increase the quality of the environment. So you know that at this time, one of the most important focus is about the carbon footprint. And I apologize because I make some extraction from the report, and usually it's written in French, but I think it's many numbers, and I will speak about them if you cannot read the French. But the effort targeted by the organizing committee is to decrease 2 times the carbon footprint of the event in comparison to the Olympics of Rio and London, because Tokyo, due to the pandemic period, was really different, and they reach the objective because you can see that it's less than 54% than the previous games, and this is important. But of course, when I spoke about trajectory in the last in my previous slides, it's important because if the Olympics can make an effort and decrease, for example, about 10 or 20% for each edition, but Paris Paris Organizing Committee make a strong effort to decrease to about 50%. So the evolution, the trajectory is really important. It's not more or less flat. It's really a real effort to go down. And I don't have the numbers for Los Angeles 2028, but I heard about Brisbane Olympics in 2032, and they speak about more or less positive, not positive, but more than neutrality, more than carbon neutrality. So of course, it's always complicated because you have to make some compensation in some side. It's not only to reduce at the level of zero the carbon footprint, but it's important to make this strong effort and to try to go quite faster by this way. So when I spoke about the effort of the different sectors, when you make the measurement of the carbon footprint, you can see that it's sometimes linked to the building works. The minus 24% is linked to building works. So it's more the industry of building works who makes some specific effort. The temporary venues also an important sources of decreasing the carbon footprint, and also the question of energy. But you know that in France, energy is more coming from nuclear industry. So if we organizing the games with the same way in another country, it can increase the carbon footprint of energy. So by the way, we can see that it's not only the effort of the organizing committee, but also the different combination of the effort of the different industry sector. But they make a specific effort for temporary venues, for renting a lot of equipment to decrease the carbon footprint. About the transportation, it's also, of course, it's the most important aspect. They don't make any effort to limit the participation of the spectators in the stadium, but the public transport or the high-speed train between Paris and the other European cities help a lot to decrease the transportation carbon footprint. So this is also an aspect linked to the transport sectors and not or the location of Paris, but not only to the games organization. And one last thing that I want to mention, because it's particularly an important topic politically in France, in Paris, and also because I'm working on a specific project on that aspect, is about the water quality. Because you probably know that the Seine River, as many big cities, is not really was forbidden for swimming since 1923. And due to specific efforts, they try to make to increase the quality, the water quality, to make the competition in the Seine River, the triathlon, the long distance swimming. And this summer, in less than 1 week, next weekend, the Parisian people will swim in the Seine River due to the efforts, and especially with this weather, and to the strong efforts to increase the quality of the Seine River. So it's one important legacy of the Olympics. So this is one also important aspect, and in this case, the context of the Olympics increase more or less the investment to increase the water quality of the Seine River with the creation of different tanks to clean the water and so on, which is 1.5 billion of euro invested, and a lot of effort at different levels. So we really make a big step in this direction due to the Olympics. So just to conclude and not be too long, so we have in the question of with the Olympics, we have a lot of finally good results, but not only due to the organizing committee, but part of it. But we still have some quick question who stays in the shadow, especially I think about the transportation of the spectators. We always want to have a lot of spectators. We don't speak about the carbon footprint of the TV broadcasting of the Olympics. So we still have some important question in the managed by the sport organization who need to be challenged in the next edition of the Olympics. So I will stop here to not be too long, and I'm happy to give answers about more specific details of project during the second step of the presentation.
Thank you, Per-Olaf. So now we will move a little bit more north to Sweden. Daniel Svensson, he's associate professor in sports science at the Department of Sports Sciences at Malmö University. His research has a focus on knowledge production in sport, often related to sport ecology, and he has published broadly on the intersection between sport and environmental sustainability. He has led or participated in many national and international research projects within the sport ecology field, and he's a member of the Sport Ecology Group. So, Daniel, you may proceed.
Thanks, Annette, and thanks to IXP for organizing this session. Glad to be part of it. I will try to share my presentation. Do you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay. I will start with this image. I will go back a little bit from the Paris Olympics and start with a longer historical perspective here. And this image, this illustration is called the Great Acceleration, which is a way to visualize the developments of the world since 1750 until 2010. And what we see here is a tremendous economic growth, progress in many areas, also growth in terms of world population and urbanization and so on. So to the left, it's a very small here, I realize that, but to the left you have all of these factors, that we associate with the industrialization of society and economic growth, and the urbanization, the growth of population, the energy use, and so on. So that's basically, in most aspects, the positive development. And then on the other side, the green ones that we see there to the right, those are sort of the consequences of the developments to the left. So those are the environmental consequences in terms of domesticated land, tropical forest loss, biodiversity loss, rising emissions, and so on. And this is not something that we take from sports science. It's a much broader thing, but it's also something that is highly related to sport, I will argue, because this is the time and the context in which modern sports has emerged. And you could also say that modern sports show a similar trajectory as this one. We see a similar growth, a positive growth in so many areas of sport in terms of participation, in terms of facilities, in terms of results, performance levels, and so on. But we also see some negative consequences, as Pierre also touched upon in relation to the Olympics. So this is an image that illustrates this just from one sport, and it's from cross-country skiing, and it's something that indicates the developments, basically mostly in relation to equipment, but this is also linked to performance. So if you look at the skier from the 1950s, you see that the equipment used is very, very basic, which also means that the environmental impact of that equipment is also quite small. And the modern day skier, and it doesn't even have to be a very good skier, it could be someone like me, for example, who is more like a leisure skier, but still, there's so much more to offer in terms of equipment. There's so much more specialized equipment for different types of snow, different types of races, and so on. So you have a much bigger impact, environmental impact, due to this development, which is a positive development if you want to perform and if you want to ski faster, but maybe also with some negative consequences if you think about the environmental impact. And this is just one sport, and you could do a similar one for basically any sport. And this development could be framed with this concept of sportification. It's a concept that is widely used within sport science and sport studies. It's developed by Alan Gutman in his book From Ritual to Record, and also by other scholars who have added on to this theoretical framework. But basically, it's an attempt to frame the developments of sports, trying to see some general development trends and some criteria that we can see in basically all sports. And some of those are specialization, for example, equipment for different types of races, more specialized coaches, and so on. Rationalization in terms of more scientific base for training and competition. Standardization of arenas and other aspects. Regimentation, like more detailed rules, regulations, organization of international sports on national levels, on local levels, and so on. And then also quantification, trying to keep track of measuring performances in training and in competitions. And this frames, to me at least, this frames the strive in sport, the sort of underlying logic of increasing performance, of beating your opponents, of becoming better and better, eventually for trying to win. And this is a beautiful thing in many ways, but also with some consequences. And we will get into that a little bit more now. So if we look into the history of environmental sustainability and sports, we can say that there's a long historical idea, at least, of using sports, especially outdoor sports, to build relations to the natural environment and to try to foster a sense of care for nature in different ways. Then you can have a question mark whether that actually works or not. There are different studies pointing in different directions here, but it's not to be taken for granted that doing nature sports will lead to more sustainable behavior. But there's such an idea. And as Brian McCullough, also from the Sport Ecology Group, has pointed out, and many other scholars as well, sustainability has come to matter a lot in sport over the last few decades. But there's still a question of whether organizations and individuals are actually acting in accordance with those ideas or the relevance that sustainability has come to have. And a just published article, I saw it just yesterday, basically, by Amanda Schumann and Philippe Fonard. They have studied the IOC's response to environmental issues over time, and they argue that it was very reactive or almost passive until the late 1980s, early 1990s, where they became more proactive instead. So there was sort of a delay there if you compare with the United Nations, for example, or UNESCO and other international organizations. But then in 1996, sustainable development was written into the Olympic Charter, so it's there. However, when we look at the developments of individual Olympic Games and how they sort of perform environmentally, this has been studied by Madeleine Orr and Gino Del Fiacco, Anthony Gino Del Fiacco. And they can show that even though these environmental issues have sort of climbed on the agenda, they are more and more important in the policy discussion. The actual performance of Olympic Games does not always match with that. So you can see some of the games in the 1990s were more sustainable, less environmentally harmful than some of the games we have seen in the 2010s, for example, Sochi, Rio de Janeiro, and others. So just because the environmental issues are on the agenda doesn't always necessarily mean that the outcome is more positive. But hopefully, as we heard from Pierre-Olaf, it will go in that direction. So again, if we look at this idea, the underlying logic of sports to improve and to perform better, we have that also in the Olympic motto, as many of you will be well aware of. And I would like to pose this question, whether this works together with sustainable development or whether there is something we need to do or consider to change in relation to this. And in a book that we published a couple of years ago, we argued that sport can contribute in two main ways, both by managing its own environmental impact, as we saw with the Paris Games, but also by using its huge platform to influence athletes, fans, supporters, spectators, and other stakeholders into more sustainable practice. So it's both about the impact of sport itself, but also trying to use the platform. And there is more and more research coming about that, how to use that platform in positive ways. So trying to wrap this up, Brian McCullough and Tim Kellison argued in 2018 that sport has a long track record of delivering positive outcomes, but maybe that's mainly in the social areas and partly also in economic areas, but not so much in the environmental areas. So if one of the three pillars of sustainability has been lagging behind in sports, it's the environmental one. And with this, with the sportification model, we can see that this strive for performance is something that sort of unites all sports, and they follow this similar trajectory. But what we also see is that sportification can lead to trying to actually limit the strive for performance when it is perceived to threaten the integrity of sport in different ways. So it's not unheard of that we actually limit performance. We have done it with doping, for example. There's a huge debate about sex testing regimes. We have measuring of testosterone levels as one example. We have limited altitude training. We have forbidden certain equipment like the shark skin swimsuits. So there is a track record also of, through this sportification logic, actually limiting performance if we find it pressing enough to do so, because it threatens the integrity of sport in different ways. And I would like to ask whether you think that climate change and environmental issues more broadly can be such a limiting factor. Do we see sports moving in the direction of what Brian Wilson and Brad Millington has called contextual sport, that is sports adapting to the geographical environmental context in which they are conducted? And final slide, just to highlight how these issues are lifted also by the UN in different ways. In a report from 2022 written by Madeleine Orr, the Sports for Nature report, it is stated that sport is a vector for unprecedented nature positive action with its sizable player and fan base, as well as the large spatial area it occupies. And football alone is estimated to be played by 265 million participants in 5,735 football stadiums worldwide, has an estimate of 5 billion fans. So just to highlight the enormous capacity of sport to contribute to positive environmental outcomes in different ways. And that is not something that we only see in sports science or only within sports, but also from a UN perspective. Sport has a huge potential, and we see positive signs that we are starting to also use that potential in new ways. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Let's switch over to our last presenter, Jeffrey Levine. He is PhD and Associate Clinical Professor in the Department of Sport Business at Drexel University in the United States. He leads the esports business program and teaches across the domains of sport law, esports business, and sustainability. He's trained both in law and the social sciences, and this interdisciplinary research he uses to explore the intersection of sustainability, law, and human development across the global sport ecosystem, including emerging digital spaces such as esport. So here we have a new approach. Jeff is past president of the Sport and Recreation Law Association. His broader scholarship interrogates how sport organizations respond, often unevenly, to evolving sustainability, legal, and governance pressures in both traditional and digitally native sport contexts. And just like Daniel Svensson, he's a member of the Sport Ecology Group, and I think they collaborated a lot in the past. So Jeff, you may start.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, everyone. First of all, can you see my slides? I'm presenting them, but
yes,
is everyone able to see them?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yes.
Lovely. Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Jeffrey Levine from Drexel University here in Philadelphia, in the United States, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. So this presentation is part of a joint project that I've been working on with my colleague Walker Ross from the University of Edinburgh, who's also a member of the Sport and Ecology Group. And we will be looking at how sustainability is written into legal documents for the Paris 2024 Olympiad, and whether those promises actually carry legal weight. So the big question that we're asking here is, are these sustainability goals that are in these governing documents truly enforceable from a legal standpoint? Or are they mostly symbolic, meant to look good without any follow through? So we will do a brief walkthrough of some of the elements in the contracts and connect these aspects to some of the legal and social science theory, and talk about why this matters, and hopefully also connect to some of the elements that Pierre Olaf and Daniel had mentioned in their presentation as well. So here's just a quick roadmap of what's ahead. We're going to provide a little bit of context, go through a bit of the literature, also a little bit of law, and then take a look after we do the framing question, some of the findings, the discussion, and really what this means. So one of the most pressing challenges facing the Olympic Games today is the question of sustainability, especially from an environmental sustainability, as sustainability can take various dimensions. And this, as the scale and complexity of the games continue to grow, so too does criticism from different stakeholders about the environmental footprint. So scholars such as Del Fiaco and Orr and Mueller and colleagues have documented how many of the IOC sustainability efforts are being met with a level of criticism. And at the same time, researchers are raising a related concern. When ambitious sustainability promises are made, who is actually responsible for delivering them? And crucially, what happens if and when those commitments fall short? So this is where Walker and my project enter the conversation. We examine the host contract and the operational agreements of the Paris 25 Olympics, asking, are these environmental sustainability provisions within these documents really legally enforceable? Or are they more performative or symbolic, meant to signal an intention that they want to give some weight to sustainability, but really not requiring meaningful follow through? Now, if there is follow through, that's great, but legal enforcement of specific elements to specific thresholds, that's another story. Or maybe this is something completely different. Maybe these contracts are less about compelling action and more about having the IOC project the appearance of action, where the IOC is managing the perceived responsibility that they have for addressing climate change or being climate positive without actually mandating that certain legal expectations truly occur. So we're going to be looking at some socio-legal theory as well as contract law to explore this potential tension. So to frame this project, we're going to look a little bit at some literature about Olympic governance and socio-legal theory. And as Daniel just mentioned, Schumann and Vonard reported that the traditional reactive nature of the ILC, that the ILC has really been historically reactive when it comes to climate change, and so only been a more recent phenomenon of trying to get ahead of this. Garrett and Gauthier point out that while the ILC includes environmental clauses in their contracts, these provisions have historically been vague and hard to enforce. So it really is unclear who has the true responsibility if these clauses are vague. And then there's also concern. Mueller and Hosick document this recurring cycle where there's ambitious sustainability promises that have been made in the past, that are made during the bidding stage, but they fade or unrealized when the games are delivered. And to get a sense of these patterns, I want to point out this theory of legal endogeneity by Edelman, which really talks about how organizations create internal rules that look like law, but really function more like internal policy that reshape the legal meaning of the law from within. And so by shaping the law in a manner that's advantageous to the organization, it creates the appearance of regulation without truly complying with the legal obligations that are mandated by courts, legislatures, or the public as a whole. And this is where the concept of symbolic compliance comes into play, where the legal language in these documents signals responsibility without requiring meaningful change. And so that it is where we kind of jump in with sustainability in Olympic governance. The question becomes, is this more about optics than accountability? And when we talk about the law, from the legal literature has something to say about host city contracts. So, of course, these documents are adjudicated under Swiss law, and there's a core principle called good faith, and it's written directly into the Swiss Civil Code, which means that the parties are expected to act honestly and sincerely when fulfilling their contractual duties. So, if someone signs onto making these environmental commitments just for public relations without any true intent to follow through, that could violate this legal principle. But even with this in mind, a larger problem remains. Many of the environmental terms in the host city contract are vague or need to be better defined, or just are at the discretion of the IOC. And courts have noted, as well as legal scholars, that vague contracts are a big problem. When there are ambiguous terms in the contract or it's discretionary, it's hard, if not impossible, to hold the parties accountable and enforce them. Now, technically, the host city contract, whether it's section 35 or 36, it contains liquidated damages clauses. And liquidated damages clauses are a fancy legal term that says, in the event of non-compliance, the breaching party will be assessed some sort of financial penalty for their failure to perform. And it's the money that's being assessed or asked to be paid or withheld, in this case by the IOC, is supposed to be a financial approximation of the loss. But there's really no track record of the IOC either litigating or enforcing the HCC in this space. And so this creates what the literature calls a political signaling, using legal sounding commitments to provide proactive or responsibility, or I guess to look proactive and responsible without any real legal risk. So in other words, the point isn't really about enforcement, but it's about public perception. And that really takes us back to that legal the theory by Edelman that these structures exist less to truly enforce sustainability and hold parties accountable, and more that you're looking to show that you're being socially sustainable or environmentally sustainable. So we're looking to see what is the true enforceability of these contracts. Are they symbolic, or are they truly enforceable? And we look at the closing report from the Olympic Agenda 2020+5 that says that the Olympic host contract requires host cities to embed sustainability across all future editions of the games, but the question becomes really how enforceable or how complete or specific is the language. So we look at some of the clauses in the host city contract, particularly 15.1, 15.2A, and 15.2B. And I know I'm a little bit stretched for time, so I'll try to push through these. But we look at the language in red, and we can see that a lot of this language is somewhat vague. At first glance, it certainly looks formal and directive. Things like shall undertake to carry out all activities, shall define, implement, and communicate, shall take all necessary measures, excuse me. But there's either a lack of definitions or specificity, or it's unclear how this will be operationalized or who controls what are these necessary measures and when will it be necessary. And it kind of leaves it with the IOC to determine that. If it's through outside documents, that's great, but usually contracts are interpreted within that document itself. You can't really look to extrinsic or external evidence unless a court's going to adjudicate that. And then with the operational requirements, we have something similar, where there's a lack of operational metrics with SUS 01 and 05. Of course, 04 does mention ISO 20121, which is an internationally recognized approach. So that does give some operational aspects, but the majority of the information here is either nebulous or lacks metrics. And so this does create a problem because if key qualifiers are undefined, like what is material or what it means to minimize emissions, that creates a lack of accountability or a lack of specificity. So the language might be strong on first glance, but there are concerns. So as we kind of go to the discussion and prepare to end here, it's important to note that yes, most of the clauses that we cover here do have legally binding language, but operationalizing them or actually holding them parties accountable is difficult because they're operationally vague. You need specificity. And that specificity, if it's not there, can be internally reshaped by the IOC through that legal endogeny theory that's provided by Edelman. And without that specificity, they mostly become symbolic because there is a lack of meaningful enforcement or a lack of operationalization. So really the implications here is that the contract clauses that are in Paris 2024 show that the remedies are either weak or vague because the language is not specific and it really it limits enforceability. Using broad terms without metrics leaves accountability to IOC discretion, which opens the door for symbolic actions and also then would potentially create situations like tree planting ceremonies or sustainability themed performances, things that might not meaningfully move the needle on climate change, although Paris 2024 did some things on their own that really moved the needle. So, but there are concerns about potential greenwashing. So future host agreements really need clear legal obligations and external enforcement. And without them, sustainability really remains a performative gesture and not a regulatory commitment. So I know that a lot was presented there. Apologies for moving at a fast clip and maybe not drilling down as much as this topic really merited, but I'm happy to answer any questions or you can email me. So thank you very much.
Thank you, the three speakers. And actually, we only have about 10, 12 minutes left, so I don't want to use it. So are there any questions from the audience? Anything, anyone who wants to
I just want
voice
to
a
mention,
question?
Annette, we've got
Yes.
a question through the Q&A. Don't know if you can read it. It's quite extensive, but there are some points here. I don't know if you can read it through the Q&A. Was submitted 40 minutes ago.
No,
or if any of if our panelists can read it.
No, but maybe you can read it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you can read it and maybe I wouldn't be reading it myself. I think it's quite extensive, but if someone wants to address some of the points here, that would also be possible if none of our attendees currently wants to ask something directly to our panelists. Just feel free to put your hand up, and we can also give you the mic and the camera to ask something directly to our panelists.
Just reading it right now.
Darlene. Darlene has a question. It's in the chat. She asks, Jeff, how does your presentation link to what others spoke about today?
Oh, did you want me to answer? Do we want to answer Kat's question first, or do we want to do the question for me? Because I'm happy to answer both.
Yeah, then just answer both.
Okay. So I'm curious what Pierre Olaf and Daniel have to say about this, but I certainly see the merits of downsizing the scale of the games, as well as establishing more permanent infrastructure, or as it's been thrown out, the rotating limited sites. I think that from a legal perspective, if the focus is about sustainability, and let's keep in mind that sustainability is also the ability to actually put on these games themselves, beyond the economic or governance aspects. And I think that radical changes should not be off the table from a legal perspective. If you're voluntarily asserting that the IOC has a legal obligation for the environmental stewardship of the Olympic movement, then establishing more specific, more enforceable, more attainable processes and procedures to realize the rhetoric and commitments that the IOC is making is a legally a wise decision.
There anyone who wants to add something?
But yes, just a few things, because Kat's comments is quite extensive, but it's different. In one side, there's my opinion, my personal opinion. On the other side, how I see the future of the Olympics. So from my side, the IOC will not downsize the event because of course it's the question of the money, the power to have something huge. And I don't think they want to lose that. And I said it quite quickly when I spoke about transportation and the carbon footprint of transportation. They don't make any effort to decrease the attendance of the spectators or to decrease just international spectators, because you can fill the stadium with the national spectators, and it will decrease about 2/3 the carbon footprint of transportation, because it's mainly plane who make the big impact. So they don't want to make this effort, and I think it doesn't change in the future. In one hand, Tokyo can be, from my side, I think Tokyo will be can be the model of the future of sport mega events, because you know that most, maybe 99% of the people watch the Olympics on their screen, and why we make this carbon footprint just to fill the stadium with some people on site. We can just have TV broadcasting to watch the event. We don't need to have some spectators on site. And of course, it's 50 or 60% of the carbon footprint. So we know how to do it, but sports organization don't want to do it by this way. So I think it's some question that we have to raise, and I think some priorities when we balance the economic aspects and the environmental aspects. The priority is still the economic aspects.
I can tag on to that. I think it's what Jeff said also, that we need to think about quite extensive changes and not take stuff off the table, but really consider new ways of doing this international sport exchange. And I also think that if anything, the COVID pandemic showed that we are capable of changing things quite rapidly and quite dramatically if we feel that it's a pressing enough issue. So apparently we have not yet felt that about environmental sustainability, because we're happy to work with that until it somehow challenges the economy or performance, if we talk about sports.
And I want to just touch on the question about how my presentation connects with Pierre-Olav and Daniel, and I think that this conversation right here is a perfect connection point. Pierre-Olav, you had mentioned in your presentation about high standards were to be met in Paris 2020 for sustainability. The question becomes, where are those standards? Are they in the contracts that the parties sign that are legally enforceable, or are they outside? And if they're outside, what are the enforcement mechanisms, the carrots and the stick, in the event that these specific points are not reached? And as we also, I think Daniel mentioned, Sochi, Rio, the environmental components were not as robust, and was it supposed to be a higher level of robustness in those other Olympiads? But I think most intimately, how this conversation connects to my presentation in this legal indigeneity framework by Edelman. If the IOC is unwilling to truly explore ways to make the games more climate friendly, whether it's limiting travel through less spectators or a lower carbon footprint, because Pierre-Olav, you had just mentioned the significant amount of the carbon footprint is in travel, and you can use as many recycled materials in bedding as you can, but if you can't prevent the travel component with the CO2 being released, or if we are going to be staging multiple Olympics in a variety of locations, and we're not going to downsize, then how serious are we talking about these commitments for sustainability, or is it more about performance and symbolic box checking and saying, hey, we're doing our part, but we're not willing to do our part to the extent, as Daniel was kind of alluded to the point where the sportification or the sport performance takes a back seat to the environmental challenges. And I think that looking at what the true legal meaning or obligations of these contracts have from the standpoint of environmental sustainability versus what is the rhetoric and language that's being espoused by the IOC, saying that we're going to build a better world together through sport. We're going to minimize our footprint and maximize our positive influence across a variety of spheres, including the environmental one. We need to balance what's being put out there versus what's the reality being operationalized.
Thank you. Well, our time is almost over. However, we have 2 questions in the chat. They are going into a different direction, but I still would like to approach them. First one by Monika Oberndorfer. How do you think the Olympic Games in LA will develop with President Trump and his focus on America first and not sustainability? Who has the lead, the US or the IOC? Probably Jeff, you know most about it. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry. We're bad again, so sorry about that.
Yeah.
So I think, and I have not looked at the 2028 host city contract or the the operational requirements, but I imagine they're not significantly different than the Paris ones. But I'll leave that. I'll leave that here for now because the LA 2025 organizing committee for the Olympic Games and the USOC really probably are and the various stakeholders that are working with the Olympic movement here are the ones carrying the water. And I know that there's a commitment to have a very sustainable games in LA, minimizing new construction, focusing on reusing materials, doing things to lower the carbon footprint of transportation. But I think when it comes to President Trump's focus on America first, I think you'll see more about the rhetoric in the self-aggrandization about either him or the nation of America, and less about the environmental aspects. So I don't want to say propaganda, but see things that are America centric, and that's probably going to be the biggest component. I mean, if we have this conversation in a couple of years, I'll be curious if there'll be boycotts for some reason, but that's probably a conversation for another day. But Trump is a huge lover of fans and treads in this sort of this elevated masculinity trope that we see from a lot of strongman leaders throughout the world. So it would be, I think the Olympics would be something that Trump is probably going to do much to try to retain and not undercut hosting them. So I think that there might not be significant concern for sustainability or any of the things that might exasperate the states holding the Olympics.
Yeah. So, but for us from Europe, it will be really interesting to keep our eyes on Milano Cortina next winter, where we will have the Winter Games, and there have been a lot of promises concerning ecological sustainability, and they are already being broken with building new facilities, although there are facilities, stadiums, and so on and so on. So I think we really have to watch these ones very closely. In Germany, we had a video, a documentary by one of our big ski racers, Christian Neureuter. He called it The Game with the Alps. And it will be really interesting to follow up what's being done here around the corner for us in Europe. So I'm sorry, we have to finish here. Time runs fast, yeah. 1 hour is over. I thank every one of you, and I think all of you who have still questions, you can approach the speakers. Jeff already gave his email. Maybe the others will put down or can down their emails in the chat before we turn off here. So yeah, if you have more questions, do not hesitate to write to them. And I would like to thank you all again for taking your time, the 1 hour, and see you soon again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Much.